Well, good evening. Welcome to our forum on global women's issues. My name is Drew Smith. I'm the director of the Center for International Programs, and we, along with the Women's History Organization at Henderson State, are sponsoring this event, and I hope that you will find it informative. I would like to thank the Women's History Organization, and especially the President, Rebecca Albright, and for the group coming up with some very creative questions that is going to guide the first half of our evening tonight. I hope that you in the audience are thinking of questions as well, and that you'll have that opportunity about halfway through to ask your own questions. This is International Focus Week at Henderson, and this year, because International Focus Week normally falls in March, but because Women's History Month is also in March, we decided to collaborate and do a theme this week of global women's issues, and that's the purpose of tonight's panel discussion. Women's issue has an effect on all of us. All of us have a significant female in our life, whether it's a mother, a daughter, a sister, or whatever. And the issues that face women have an impact on all of us. But I think it's particularly true that in the Western world and the United States, we don't think often of the issues facing women in developing and underdeveloped countries around the world. Inadequate health care, subpar education, the lack of economic and political power, as well as some oppressive cultures in which they live, they find it difficult to face these issues on a day-to-day existence. Our panelists tonight are from India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Rwanda, and I'm sure that you will be enlightened by their responses. Keep in mind that their responses are from their own experiences, but I know that you will learn a lot from the discussion tonight. So our purpose tonight is to give you an opportunity to learn about global women's issues, to become more concerned about these issues, and to perhaps spark some creative solutions on how we can each individually in our own small way contribute to solving these important issues. We ask that you please silence your cell phones, of course. We also ask that you keep the noise down to a minimum. This room can carry noise on occasion. At the time for audience questions, we'll have 2 audience mics. We ask that you hold your question until you get a mic, because we are video recording this and we want to pick up the sound. The video recording of this will appear on YouTube in the coming weeks on Henderson's YouTube channel. Finally, at the end of this discussion tonight, if you are a student here and you need proof of attendance, we have some tickets that we will give you at the end of the event when you leave. We also ask that at the end of the event that each one of you complete a survey that is found in the program, the printed program, and I hope that you receive one of those you entered into the lecture hall. There are pens on the tables out front if you need them, and there's boxes in there in which you can drop them as well. Well, that's all the preliminaries, and so I invite you to sit back and listen to this important discussion moderated by Negin Ghazali. Negin.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Negin Ghazali. I'll be moderating tonight. I'm going to start out by introducing each of our panelists. There is a short bio about each of our panelists in your program, but I'll just start out with the names. To my direct left, I have Frida Tuishimere. Next to her is Lauren Remedios. Next is Sushita Shrestha, and next to her is Ghazal Anik. How it's going to work, the Women's History Organization prepared some questions to ask our panelists. So I'll start out with those, and like Dr. Smith said, after about an hour of discussion, we'll go ahead and open it up to the audience. So if there's something that strikes you as interesting and you want to ask about it later, just maybe make a note about it, and we can definitely address it in the question and answer period. Okay, so the first question is kind of a general, a bit of a general one. How does the 21st century woman in America compare and contrast with the 21st century woman in your cultures? And what misconceptions do Americans commonly hold about women of your cultures? And I'll go ahead and start with Frida.
Thank you. A 21st century woman in America is similar in many ways as a 21st century woman in Rwanda who lives mostly in a town. She can as well go to school as many women here do. She can get a job, she can be involved in politics. But however, a woman who lives in a rural area in Rwanda is very different from what a woman here in America is. Few of them have access to school. Most of them now are mostly viewed as housewives. They know their own rules is just to stay at home and take care of the children. They don't believe they can go out there and get a job and do something for the society. Most of them think all they can do is just stay at home. So they are different in a ways. And also, due to the poverty, most of them, all the things they have to do them, their own manual work. They have to involve a lot of energy and a lot of force, which is different because most of the things women here do, there's a bit of what the technology played out in simplifying the work they do. And about some of the misconceptions, I think most of not only just Americans, most of the people view Rwandan women or African women in general as only that part of the women who live in the rural areas. They think of them as those women who don't have a word, those women who can't do anything for themselves. However, we have also those women who are known in politics, who are known in education field, who also are participating in making decisions. So I think that's what I can say.
Lauren? Thank you, Frida. Similar to the women in Rwanda, we have, in India, we also have two kinds of women, or not kinds, but two types of women in India. One that live in the cities, which is very similar to the women in America, where they're very modern, they can have a job, they're very well educated, but then when you go to the rural areas in India, that's where a lot of the male dominance and the subservient type of women that you usually read about exist, and they still do exist today. You know, in rural, so the modern girl in India living in, say, a city like Mumbai is pretty similar to a woman living in America as terms of education, professionalism, and independence. But when you go to the rural areas, there's not a lot of equality with women's issues. They are very subservient. There's a lot of arranged marriage, bride trafficking. I mean, a lot of the social evils that occur, that you read about with women's issues, occur in some of the villages in India. You know, in India, the Western women and the Western women has already set up some level of equality in this country, which is still in the making in India. A very small percentage of women do enjoy a lot of freedoms in India, but a lot of them, because India is very rural and most of the women do live in the villages, there is a huge population that are underserved in India, especially when it comes to women. We have a lot of arranged marriages in India, and that is also one of the misconceptions, because I'm married and my marriage wasn't arranged, and a lot of people do ask me as soon as they hear that I'm from India is whether I got an arranged marriage. No. But there is a lot of arranged marriages in India, and there's a huge pressure on having sons in India. There is a huge son preference in India, which is one of the biggest taboos that I feel in our country, which has left a very staggering ratio of women to men in India, which is almost like 930 women to 1,000 men, and which brings up a lot of other social issues with that, especially bride trafficking, which we'll talk about in another question later on. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Okay. My answer will be very much similar to Lauren's, and I was telling her earlier that I think she should answer half of it and I should answer half of it, because our cultures are very similar. Like she said, that in the urban areas in India and in Nepal, it's basically the same as in the Western world as the 21st century woman in the US. But in terms of rural women, the situation is completely the opposite. And majority of the areas in Nepal are rural areas, and we could say that the development process is such that there's 5% of city areas and 95% is rural. So we cannot count the 5% as being represented as the 21st century women. In terms of the rural population, the time is like set back to the 19th century, I would say. The women in the rural areas live like they're in the 19th century, where they strive for like the basic prerequisites of development. Like they strive for food, education, health and services as such. And that is basically the case. And in terms of misconceptions, I would say that the whole society, I think Americans view the whole society as being backwards in such, but that is not basically the case. It is just that the education process is backward. It's not the society. The society has a lot of culture to it, which brings a lot of identity to the people. It's basically the education system that we need to work on it. That's basically it.
My turn?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. That's how we greet in our country. So I would like to first thank you to Dr. Drew Smith for inviting me over. Thank you, Dr. Drew. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And well, they all said the same thing, but I feel that in my country, well, I'm going to exclude all the elite class because they behave the same way as any rich female in any country. They are worried about their vacation, they are worried about what Gucci handbag they're going to buy. Are they going to travel to Dubai this year or to Switzerland? So we're going to exclude those women from my country. Yes, as in any culture, in any religion, in any country, women do suffer. In United States, I've been living here 21 years, lived in my country for 27 years. I am not an expert, but with my personal experiences, I can tell you that all females suffer with the same issues. Back home, whenever I go to visit every year, I'll tell you a small thing about the women of rural area. I don't see that they are weak females. I see great, great strength in those women who not just stand beside their husbands and their children and sacrifice daily, day after day, month after month, year after year until they die. One of the servant, a female servant in my sister's house, she's an older lady, around 60, 65 of age. She has been working all her years since she was 15. She got married very young. Her husband was a drug addict. And I, coming from the West, and I said, you know, you are so stupid. I call her Amma. Amma means an older lady. I said, Amma, you're so stupid. Your husband is a drug addict, and you are serving him, bringing home money, and sending your children to school. Why don't you get a divorce? This is what we learn living in a civilized, modern country. And she says, oh my God, what did you say? He is a crown of my head. He is my protector. He is a father of my children. I could never get a divorce. To me, hats off to those women. Sometimes we see them as a miserable human being. Really, we do. If we see through a Western eye, where women are more civilized here, more educated here, but don't our women get raped here? Don't we have centers for battered women? So to me, the suffering is there. unless or until we trained our men. The males need to be trained. We need to resolve that issue, not women's issue. We all know it's the same issue year after year for thousands of years. We need our males to be trained. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next question, and by the way, our panelists, okay, feel free to jump in anytime you have something to say, if there's something that you want to add to anything, okay?
Well, I agree with Gazalanti, and it is right that we do have to train our men, like men play an important part, especially in India with this huge change that we are wanting for our women in India. But it's so deeply rooted in tradition and culture, especially in our country, in my country, religious tradition. And that's very, very hard to break when, it's coming down from religious texts, from sacred documents about, what place a woman has in, a household. It's when we change. I'm not saying that we're changing it.
I think it's it's not the text or the religion. I grew up as a Muslim in a family household.
Definitely.
And most of the misconception is, oh my God, you must be oppressed. We're not oppressed, we're not, nobody forced us to do anything. Women are very prized in our religion and in your culture.
Exactly, yes.
You are not there, we are like diamonds, you're not going to leave a diamond on a street that anybody can pick that up. So we are very prized in our religion and in our culture.
Definitely.
So that's why there's protection for us.
Right, but then again, like as you said, the men also need to change to give that woman some form of freedom, which some of the texts do say that women just have to stay in the house and work.
Right.
And we have this new class of women coming in India, which is the educated housewives. Why get an education if you're just going to stay at home?
Right.
Also,
exactly.
The man has to give that woman, even though he's our protector, and he still has to give us that freedom to work and to get out of the house, to exercise also that freedom, but also be protected, as you said.
If they do their jobs, instead of sending women outside the household to go and earn money, I mean, if they're doing their job, the women does not have to suffer much.
Definitely, definitely. I totally agree.
On that same kind of note about religion, Frida and Suchita, how do your respective faiths shape your identities as women in your cultures? Would you like to add anything?
Thank you. When I grew up as a Christian, in a Christian family. So from what I learned mostly, whether in the family or at church, they were mostly completing each other. About respecting everybody, about behaving in a respectable manner, about dressing properly, exposing your bodies. All that had to complete of what my culture was kind of forcing me but was asking me to do as a female. So I think both of those shaped the identity of a Rwandan woman as I am now.
As I grew up in the city, in the capital city, there was a lot of Western influence in my city. So, and I went to girls' school right from elementary, and after that, high school was co-ed, and then I came here. So the faith, I would kind of relate it to what I was taught at home and what I was taught at school. What I was taught at home through my grandparents and my family members are very much different from what the education system was offered. But as my parents and both of my, and I'm from a joint family, so I live with a whole lot of people, and my aunts and my uncles and my parents are all college graduates, so they basically understood the importance of education, and my grandparents and their friends and family, they didn't. So there was a kind of a conflict, which my parents won the battle, I would say. but the beliefs that my parents and everybody follow are kind of traditional, but they go hand in hand with what actually works in the society. So I would say that my faiths and beliefs are pretty much coincide with any other Western civilized girl from America. I would say that's the case.
Okay. Okay. So we kind of touched on males a little bit back there. And I was just wondering about favoritism for male children, and how does this affect women and women's roles in your cultures? Lauren, I could start with you.
Well, definitely there is, favoritism to sons. As I said before, every good Indian household will have a son, and they always ask you whether your firstborn is a son, and it's a cause for a lot of discomfort and a lot of pressure in a lot of households. Example, one of my friends who just got married, and her parents have been pressuring her to get a son. Like, it's not about, hey, I want you to, give me a grandbaby no matter what the sex is. No, it's like, when are you going to give me that son? I'm not saying this for everybody and every household in India, but it's a huge thing where right now there are a lot of what we call missing females in India and missing women, and it's because of this the preference to have a son causes a lot of women to have abortions, and it's called gendercide, where they do the ultrasound, and if it's a female, they do get it aborted. Or even if they have a baby, there have been cases where the baby is starved, the baby girl is starved, and she dies. And it's a sad scene in India where there's a huge difference and a huge gap between the ratio of the number of men to the number of women in India. And where this happens, especially in a few states in India, like the very poor and rural states in India. One of them is Uttar Pradesh, and over there's such a huge difference and a huge gap between the number of men to the number of women in India that they actually get it's called bride trafficking, where they get brides from girls sold from different parts of the country to these men who bring them to Uttar Pradesh to sell them to men who don't have enough of women to marry in their little villages and towns. So yes, there is. And as I said,
a couple of years ago from BBC, they did a documentary on these females who miscarried their female fetuses.
Yes.
And out of all the neighboring areas, I think India has the largest number of these.
Definitely. Yeah. Female feticide is a huge problem.
And I think it's the family pressure, the culture pressure.
Definitely.
And it's again Lauren, I was talking to one of my clients, and he's a police officer. I'm not going to mention the name here in Arkadelphia. And I said, how many children do you have? And he says, third girl was just born, and his face was not, it didn't lit up, he was not happy. And I said, is everything okay with the baby? And he says, no, I wanted a son. Yes. So I think it's in men, again I said, we need to train our men,
right,
that it is in there. But in our culture, I think it's that they are the provider. Females are prized, and we think that female will get married and have a household chores, but the men will be a provider. So that's why the emphasis is on a male child.
And also with females, because women are also considered a liability in India, where when you get married, you have to pay a huge dowry, which is a huge payment as a girl to be given to a man to get married. And, such that she is considered a huge liability for her family, because if they have a daughter, they have to spend all this money to actually get her married. But if it's a son, it's, he's an asset because he gets the car and the house and, and all this money coming in.
In Middle East. In Middle Eastern countries, men are supposed to pay everything to get the girl. And in subcontinent, it's the girl family who gives everything.
Right, yes. And also because sons are prized in India also because of a religious reason. In the Hindu culture, when you die, you get burnt. And to light the funeral pyre, only a son can do it. No other member of his family. A girl cannot do it. She's not even invited to the funeral ceremony, but only the son. And that's also one of the reasons why also, to light that funeral pyre for their parents, especially for their father. But it's a huge... there are a lot of documentaries and there's a lot of recognition and awareness right now about female genocide and gendercide in India, and and I hope they do something about it. And it's also, educating the masses.
It hurts. The caste system.
Definitely.
Somebody's superior and then you're inferior.
Definitely.
Frida, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I talk about favoritism in terms of education. There are some females in Rwanda, especially in rural areas, who don't get a chance to go to school because they had brothers and their families couldn't afford to send both of them to school. So when they come to choose who goes, they don't even take into consideration maybe who has good grades. They'll be like, oh, our son has to go because our girl, if we send her to school, she's going to finish, she's coming back, she will get married and leave the family. But our son will stay here and will provide. So that plays a role in most of the time sacrificing the girl's education when it comes to making a choice, especially when the funds are not enough to send both of them.
My situation is basically the same as Lauren because the culture is very much similar and we are a Hindu kingdom, so the traditions that Lauren just said is basically the same as in Nepal. And some of the belief systems that that are like that needs to be eliminated, I would say, are like some of the derogatory belief systems are like, I would just like point out these phrases that I came across. They say like, let it be late, but let it be a son. The birth of a son paves the way to heaven. If a son is born, it is celebrated by sacrificing a goat. If it's a daughter, let's just sacrifice, or let's just celebrate it with a pumpkin. So these are some of the phrases that are kind of believed in the rural areas that has brought about a lot of difficulties in women's life in the rural areas. And basically my answer is very much similar to Lauren's, and so I would not want to take all the time.
Well, I don't, it's true, what they are saying. It happens, but I'm blessed. I have one brother, 4 sisters. We went to a private school, Christian private school back home. There was no difference between us and my brother. But yes, in urban areas, you will see less of this issue. But as you go towards rural areas, you will see more. The reason, again, so that the boys can go out and provide for the family, bring home the money, and the girls cannot have that privilege. So probably that's the reason. But
okay. Also, with education in mind, how are women typically portrayed in literature, art, popular culture in your respective countries? Frida, I can start with you.
Okay, thank you. Women didn't have a chance to express their ideas until a few years, like 40 years ago. And recently we have many females who are trying to be writers, writing their successful stories. And those stories are making a big impact on the lives of young females because at least they could see somebody they could learn from, those who were there before they didn't see anybody. All they could see is their mother who was always home. All they could see is an auntie who is always home. So now if you go out and you read a book of somebody who grew up in a poor family, but who managed to go to school and get education, and now she's a successful person. That will motivate you and make you go out there and also try to perform and be like those. So we have more women who are trying to be writers, writing about the stories. We have many women who are singers. We have many women who are poets, who are painters. Yeah, I think that's all it is.
Okay. Lauren?
Well, in ancient times, in I would say 16th century, the Bhakti poets came out, which is a movement with women, where women poets came out and wrote about their suffrage. That was the first few writings that we have about women and from women. If you go back to the older texts and the classical texts, they are portrayed as goddesses and these fertility goddesses, and I mean, they were absolutely beautiful in these texts. But at the same time, they were given like rigid, codes of conduct within those texts. Right now, there's a lot of women authors out there that talk about a woman's struggle in India just to be a modern woman and to balance being modern but also being traditional at the same time, and that's a huge battle that Indian women face, is that they still want to be traditional, they still want to hold on to those traditions, but yet be an independent modern woman. And a lot of the authors right now are writing about that structure where the struggle between being a modern woman and being a traditional Indian woman. There's very little about rural women in India, a lot of documentaries, but just very little actual literature out there about the struggles of rural women. There are very few, but and everyone's heard of Bollywood. And you know how Indians, we love our Hindi movies, and we love Bollywood, and we love the dancing, and and for me, it's just good entertainment. The women over there provide that glamorous role. Very few Hindi movies actually portray a woman being professional and successful, but it just provides that glamorous, role, and that's about it. And, yeah.
In terms of art, Nepalese art is basically religious art, where there are like paintings and drawings of all these goddesses, such as goddess of wealth, goddess of power, goddess of education, and that's how the religious art is portrayed for women. In terms of literature, during the 1930s was the only time where Nepalese poets and writers, they were allowed to publish the books and articles in their country. Before that, they had to go somewhere else, or somewhere in India, basically, in order to publish articles and books. So it's a very recent phase, and the literature part of female writers have not been able to establish themselves in this field. In terms of movies, as you say, Bollywood, we call our industry Collywood, so whatever that means. And right, and it's more similar to the, it's more the films and the movies are basically copies, and I would say to what the society is right now, and some of them are just entertainment, and some of them are very wonderful documentaries. So, but there's a long way to go, I would say. It's not up to a phase of development.
Nagini, if you would have asked me 20 years ago this question, my answer would be totally different. But now when I go, in literature, there are so many women in playwright, in dramas and movies and dancing. 20 years ago, for a classical dancer, the doors was closed and it's like a hush-hush, there's a performance. If somebody will find out, there might be a chaos in the theater. But now it's very open, it's like people have internet and the TVs, and society is very much open nowadays. It's more tolerant towards art and literature than it used to be.
Okay, we're gonna jump a little bit here and get into some politics stuff. it's kind of along those same lines, talking about women having opportunities or their limitations. How about economic empowerment, women's opportunities for economic empowerment in your respective cultures? Is it easy to be successful and live a life like a man without a man?
Again, Nagini, in an urban area, women, yes, they have the empowerment. In rural area, there is awareness coming because there was one organization, Asian Empowerment for Women, and they go from home to home and start giving them an opportunity, like a small business opportunity, that the women does not have to leave the household, and give them a beadwork or an embroidery work that where they can bring home money and yet not leaving the house. So yes, there's a lot of changes in the country, a lot of.
Okay.
Yes.
Frida?
I believe there's a lot of empowerment about women being involved in economics. The first example is that now women have equal chance as men to get a job if you have the needed qualifications, which was not the same in the last 20 or 30 years. So that's one of the big influence on women these days. Plus, women in few years ago, they didn't have the right to inherit properties. If you had brothers, means if you didn't have anything from your husband, you would not get anything from your family. But now the new law says you could get anything from your family properties. Plus, there's more of awareness, as she said, especially for those females who are in rural areas, who didn't get a chance to go to school, who don't have a lot of qualifications to apply to jobs. The government is trying to sponsor them and telling them into forming small groups, associations, and come up with just a small projects so the government can sponsor them, give them funds, so at least they can have a small income which can help them to provide at least monies for themselves instead of depending fully on the husbands, which mostly bring most of the violence in the family of those women being beaten or being mistreated because they have to depend on everything. So we have many women who have those associations about handcrafting and who have been really successful. They are sending their products abroad and they are being developed according to the incomes they get from those. So some they have projects concerning agriculture or farming, so they can at least have a small income for themselves.
Definitely. In India, right now we do have a woman president, yay, and but most of the power does rest in the hands of the prime minister. But still, we do have a woman president. Right now, 1/3 of our seats in parliament is reserved for women, which is really good. So they get represented. They can put, especially women's concerns up in the forefront. In the smaller villages, we have this term. It's called panchayat, which is like a village leader, and most of these women are they are being elected into these panchayat positions, which gives them a lot of power within their village, and that's really where it starts. That's where the problem arises, and that's where it needs to, be solved, is at the small basic village levels. And there's a lot of women's movements right now. There's this huge movement going on in India called the Barefoot College, which was set up by this man called Bunker Roy, and he's empowering women by teaching them sustainable farming, since a lot of women do actually do most of the farming and work out in the fields, provide for their household, but they have no right to the money that is being got from the farms, and they don't have land rights. But right now that's all changing, where they're actually giving land ownership, and also, as Frida was pointing out, they are also being given the right to property, and inheritance rights are being increased in India. Thank you.
As in Nepal, in 2001 was the time when women had the right to inherit property. Before that, it was basically if they were unmarried until the age of 35, then they had the right to inherit property, otherwise they wouldn't. So one of the major changes was made in 2001. And mainly in the political systems, there has been, I don't know the exact figures, but like at least some percentage of women should be represented in the parliament system. That has been the case. And even in terms of political movement as such, there has been participation, but participation does not always bring representation, you know. It's basically like, okay, there is a movement, let's go and do something, and then let's get back to what we're doing before. So there's not stability in what they believe in, and it's basically like for a certain period of time rather than let's do it for a longer period of time.
Yes, yes, please.
And I was thinking, Nagin, that as a Muslim woman in the Quran, you know, Surah An-Nisa, which is all about women, we are equal to men, okay, in all aspects. Nobody is superior than other. I don't know this inferiority and these issues, where did it started from? Where does I mean, is it from India because we came 60 years ago living together? Yes. It started as a caste system, or it has always been, I mean, where is the originality of these issues?
Well, in
Christianity, we are equal. Right. I've been from a Christian school. Mm-hmm. I have not seen that men in Christianity are superior than the women. Right. They're equal. In Judaism, I mean, where is in India, in Hinduism?
Well, I mean, they've pinpointed, and I mean, this is just a theory, but during the Indus Valley civilization, and then you come up to the Vedic era in India, and with the it was a Hindu nation, and with that there were new religions that kept threatening the Hindu way of life, like the Buddhists, the Jains, the Muslims that came in, and with that threatening, they put a lot of power, got vested in the high priest in India to protect that religion, and they were mainly men in this higher power, and that's when women took the back seat, and they weren't allowed. That's where they pinpointed it, but I mean, this is just a theory that I've read.
In Afghanistan, before Russia invaded, my father-in-law was a writer. He passed away, and my mother-in-law is also a writer, Anik's mom and dad. And he used to go to Afghanistan, and he says that one of the best medical schools are in Afghanistan. Women were treated equally, but after Russia invaded, you know how women are treated now. I mean, is the war an answer that
I think it's just a threat to their way of life, and whenever a civilization, like even in India, whenever a civilization gets threatened, there are stricter codes of conduct, and that's pretty much what happened in India. Even when the British invaded, it was very strict codes of conduct. I mean, even though the British passed laws that said that sati, which is widow burning, was unacceptable and illegal, they still found a way, to do it. Yes, there's still, dowry still exists. I mean, these are all illegal under the Indian Constitution, but it is still so widespread. There's a huge dowry in India. There are still a few cases of sati. There is...
but it's still happening.
It's still happening, yes. I think whenever a civilization gets threatened and a way of life gets threatened, that's when stricter codes of conduct starts coming in, and of course the women who are, Yeah.
I mean, they find a way, every culture, they find a way to torture a woman. They'll find a way how to punish a woman, why? Why? We're not a good mothers, we're not a good wife, we're not good daughters. Why is that?
Frida, do you have anything to add? Sushita, do you have any? You can shed some light on this.
I wish I had an answer for that.
Instead of a wife jumping into the flames, why not his father? Or why not his brother? Why a woman? Why?
It could have been reversed a long time ago, but we'll have to go back,
right,
to 300 BC. Yeah, no.
I guess, I don't know why it's that way, but still a lot of people follow what they see their elders following. So if you grew up, you saw your grandparents follow that, you think that's the right way, even if it's not good for you, even if you don't like it. We tend to think whoever is older to us, whoever is, they always have the right word. So I think that's why still the females,
Please don't
talk
think,
about
guys, we love you very much. I love my husband, we love our brothers and cousins, but these issues, I mean, I'm just...
Right. Well, yeah, it gets perpetuated. I think what Frida was saying, yeah, it gets perpetuated just through the line, yeah.
And there's a lot of guilt too if you don't follow the ways of your mother or your father, or, you know, there's a lot of guilt that comes with it. It's very psychological, especially in India, where, you know, you're just being constantly bombarded and brainwashed, as to say, most of these women, you know, into following a certain way of life, and it's very hard to get out of it. And that's probably also one of the differences over here, is that, you know, even in poorer parts of the country, women still do have the rights in America to, you know, choose who they want to marry, and just small little things that you do take for granted over here. It's a nightmare for some women in India, and you know, and that goes also with the educated. It is changing.
That women
definitely.
they wanted to marry who they wanted to marry back home. I mean, that's what I see in Pakistan.
Definitely,
you know? So
yes. But then I had girls in my class, like the ratio of boys to girls when I was doing my bachelor's, my undergrad in India, it was, you know, 80 boys to about 20 girls, and most of those girls, as soon as they finished their 12th grade, because we start college 2 years before. Like in the 11th grade, we go to pre-university, and by the time they finished with their 12th grade over here, they were already engaged. They knew who they were going to get married to, and even though all of them had like little flings in the classroom and boyfriends, I mean, it didn't matter who they were dating at that time, as long as they finished their 12th grade and got married. I mean, I know my friends, you know, on Facebook, I can't talk about her ex-boyfriend right now. She's banned me from it, but because she's married to the person that her father, you know, got her married to.
Lauren, we got married. It was an arranged marriage, married 28 years, you know. I mean,
Mashallah.
I'm a blessed woman, no complaints. I think choice marriages have more divorces than arranged marriages. Choice marriages, love marriage, has more divorces than arranged marriages.
Definitely, but then, and I can understand if it's an arranged marriage where the girl accepts it and says, okay, yes, find me somebody and I will get married.
Right.
But if she's marrying against her will, like my friend, she was dating this guy for 6 years. I mean, that's a long time throughout. They were high school sweethearts, but, you know, once her parents found out, and she had to get married to this other guy. I mean, but in that case, I don't agree with it. And in some cases, yes, because, you know, I know a lot of girls who they ask their parents to get them arranged marriages, you know, and it's completely different as long as the girl has a choice, as long as she says yes. But sometimes the girl doesn't say yes, and she just says yes because she has to. It's more of a forced yes, and that's what I don't agree with.
Okay. Maybe one of our audience members will have a follow-up question to the arranged marriage issue, hopefully. That's a hint for everybody. Okay, just one more kind of politic-y question here. In your opinion, what is the status of women's health care in your respective countries? And how accessible is women-specific health care, and how are contraceptives typically viewed?
In Pakistan, there is no issue. Women are, you know, it's open. If they can go to a female doctor or a male doctor, they can tell, you know, they need a birth control, you know, there's no issue for not having. But again, maybe in a rural area, I don't have personal experience, but in rural area, now there are doctors who go door to door and give them education that, hey, if you can't afford, you know, you can use this. But healthcare is available for everybody.
Okay, Frida?
What I can add, in Rwanda, healthcare is equally available to both females and males, but however, due to poverty, there are few health centers which cause females especially, I can say, especially in case if a woman is in labor, many women die because they can't get to health centers as soon as they need to. So that problem, not having enough infrastructures for the health centers is still an issue in Rwanda. Also concerning the contraceptives, these days family planning is one of the priority of Rwanda because as a small country, I think it's like 5 times smaller than Arkansas. It's a very tiny country, and actually it has more than 11 million people living in it. And of those 11 million, about 90% of the population lives from farming and agriculture, which means if the population keeps growing and growing, in few years, people won't even have a place to stay. So the government is more empowering people to join the programs of family planning, and also not only focusing on females, but also telling husbands to get involved in accepting the choice of the females, and also in helping them. By that, the government tells them of the advantage either the female or the males will get. Because if a female is not pregnant every month, she will also have to get a job and work. She can help the male to support the family. But if it is the other case, the man will only have to work by himself to support the family. And also that will help in develop the education, because it's easier to provide for 2 children than to provide for 10 children to give them all their needs. So the government is putting a lot of energy in telling the people to join the health planning, the family planning programs.
Yes, definitely. Even in India, we do need family planning because with the population of 1 billion, I would hope we need some form of family planning. But yes, the government does promote the use of birth control. I mean, there's no issue with getting birth control in India. The thing right now is female sterilization, where you have 3 kids and then the women get sterilized in India. As Frida said, we have universal health care in our country, but sometimes a lot of women die due to complications during birth, because a lot of women in the rural areas do have their babies at home with the midwife, and if there's a complication, there's usually they don't have access or government funding to a hospital nearby, and those are the only few cases that where women do suffer if they have any complications due to childbirth, or especially also postnatal care with their children.
But Lauren, if you remember, in our villages, most of the women they know their own health care. They're in the villages, in the farms, and they have to deliver the baby. They'll cut the umbilical cord, wrap it, and they're done.
Oh, yes.
They don't need any Western doctor for their treatment. Or at home, they will do their own home remedies.
Right. Yes. So, definitely. But even if there is
it's self-sufficient.
Oh yes, definitely. Yes. But if they do, I mean, there are healthcare centers, but they're not properly equipped, because there are new problems that arise even in the 21st century with medicine. I mean, but I know of cases where women gave birth while they're farming, strap the baby on their back and continue whatever they're doing. So, I mean, they're very resilient women in India, I would say. Shida.
When I was growing up, right, in elementary school, we had to take the education that was called, we had a subject that we had to learn that was health and population education. That was mandatory, that we had to pass that in our board exam in order to pass the school. So, and in that we basically learned about different sexual transmitted diseases and about reproductive health and like birth control technologies that are out there for women. So I think like the government is promoting birth control mainly, and this is mainly in the urban areas, but in the rural areas, the situation of immunization, sanitation, health and nutrition is very acute. And mainly it's because of the topography of Nepal with rugged mountains, when the services cannot actually reach to the villagers and the people out there. And that is one of the major problems. And women's limited control over their own fertility has been one of the issues, and the unavailability of the resources is one of the reasons that makes it difficult for reproductive access, and this is mainly in the rural areas for women.